Welcome back. The enthusiasm and drive for entrepreneurship in the Black community has seen a huge uptick in recent years. However, despite the increase in Black-owned startups and businesses, disproportionate challenges still remain. I had the opportunity to sit down with successful entrepreneur Chad Johnson, and he shared his struggles, his successes, and the wisdom he's gained along the way. I think it's safe to say an overlooked aspect of systemic racism is how it hampers the ability of the Black entrepreneur to actually be able to obtain funding to support their business dreams. Now, you actually left a job at a well-known healthcare provider and went out to venture on your own, not really knowing what you wanted to do. Please tell us more about that.
Yes, I spent the first 10 years of my professional career, background more human resources, organizational development, but really saw that, kind of felt led to serve in a greater capacity, and entrepreneurship was one of those avenues where you just don't know exactly what you're gonna do. And so I left Aurora Healthcare in 2009, so over 11 years ago now. Wow, time really flies. Got involved in a digital media company, co-founded a social impact coffee brand here in Milwaukee called Making Coffee in collaboration with Stone Creek, and now am even a founder of a health tech startup company, and looking forward to really bringing that to market in the masses. So yeah, I mean, going from corporate American stability and you've got things already established for you to now you're actually the captain of your own ship. But then you got to navigate a lot of the different nuances of, raising capital, ensuring you're making sales, working through the barriers of preconceived notions, being a Black business owner, being a Black owner in general, maybe potentially losing sales because of people's, unfortunate notions about whether or not you can deliver. Unfortunately, I've experienced a lot of those different things. And so excited about the opportunity to talk about some of the barriers that I've faced, but also, some things that are happening that allow us to really alleviate them.
Statistics actually show us that both lending and equity are the most overriding factors responsible for Black entrepreneurs' struggles to obtain business funding. So you just mentioned not only do you have one business, you have several, and they're all in different industries. So I find that to be very interesting indeed. But I want you to kind of talk about how you were able to start up that first business and maybe some of the obstacles that you did face.
Fortunate for me, as it relates to some of the businesses prior to the tech startup, they were partnerships with others. And so individuals who may have already had something in existing brought me on board, and I was able to kind of glean behind them, right? And so I know that that's not necessarily done with regularity. That's not the case for everyone. There were moments where, being a partner in a business where we looked at business financing, and you go through all those barriers like, are you going to go traditional bank financing? Are you looking for business grants? They're looking for you to be, labeled as a minority-owned business, and you're thinking that's going to get it. And you got to get the business in order to get the loan for the collateral. And if you don't get the business, they don't give you the loan. And so kind of dealing with those barriers, right? But kind of really for me, where I am now and having to navigate it, really understanding, as you talk about creating wealth, within the Black community, access to capital has been a barrier, whether it's been traditional bank financing or equity financing. And just last year in 2020, over $150 billion in venture capital was issued. That's a record, but only less than 1% of that venture capital went towards Black founders. And that's historically been the case. Even in a record year, we're still not even over 1% of that capital. And so it's a barrier that exists to this day. There's definitely some progress being made, and we'll speak to some things that are done intentionally, but it does exist.
You mentioned that sometimes there are things that are deliberately done to serve as a barrier. What would you say those are?
Yeah, I mean, I'd speak more specifically to kind of where I am now as a starter of a health tech company. And so my mother retired from Briggs & Stratton, right? And unfortunately, they filed for bankruptcy. So her pension is in jeopardy and she lost her retiree insurance. And her out-of-pocket expenses skyrocketed from less than $20 a month on insurance to over $400 a month out of pocket for the same medication when she was forced to apply for Medicare. And so you're saying, well, what do we do about this? And so, she actually said, hey, God gave me the name TipaScript years ago. I'm like, well, what the heck is TipaScript? She's like, well, that's where you come in, figure it out. And so I'm like, well, okay, Mom, I'll figure it out. And so that's how really the genesis of TipaScript started. And so looking at navigating this whole space of doing a health tech startup or anything in tech in general. I've had to learn, right, just by experience, all the different barriers that I would run into. Anything in financial tech, health tech is very capital intensive. It takes a lot of money just to get started before you even make your first dollar, right? So that's one of the first barriers right there. And so as I mentioned, less than 1% of venture capital is given to Black founders. So, you look at, I've got a triple threat against me out the gate, coming from an underrepresented community, being a startup founder, doing something new, and then even being pre-revenue, not making a dollar yet, all right? So what are you gonna do then? And then you even add to that level, I'm not on the West Coast in Silicon Valley. I'm not on the East Coast in New York. I'm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is not a flagship for venture capital. And so what do you do? And so those were some of the barriers I've heard a lot of no's in this journey of like, okay, hey, I've got this great idea, can you partner with me to launch it? Well, you're too early, right? Or, you know what, you've got to have 1 million to 2 million in capital reserves before you can use our platform. I don't know many people in my circle that got 1 million to 2 million that are just sitting in reserves to get it launched. But if you're in Silicon Valley, maybe your uncle, right?
That is just it. People don't have the access to the capital, and education is one of the main barriers when we're talking about, getting a business off the ground or even understanding how the banking system works so that you can make it work for you. Some of your clients include, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Fiserv Incorporated. Also, there's Molson Coors Beverage Company, and then Johnson Controls International. Those are huge. And so what advice do you have for someone who's sitting at home watching you and they're listening to you talk and they're like, he's on the ball, but I don't know those things.
Absolutely.
What advice do you have for them?
Leverage your relationships. So those are 3 corporations you mentioned that are, well-known global companies. And I got those opportunities through relationships. And that's not to diminish my skill set, my confidence in myself, and my ability to deliver, but I got all of those opportunities because of a relationship. And so as we look historically over individuals, I think we all have been in situations where you say, how in the world did that person get that job, right? How did they get there?
Not what you know, it's who you know.
It is, literally, it is. You're like, I could do that. I'm doing better than them, right, in delivering. But you're like, how did they get it? And in many instances, it's about relationships.
It is.
What I would really just recommend that everyone do is continue pushing forward and staying in your lane and doing what you do. Don't try to, deviate from what you do. Continue doing what you're doing and keep the pressure on. We don't want the energy to die down. We don't want it to just be something 10 years we say, well, we tried and it didn't work. We've got to stay very intentional about it. And so I'm thankful for everyone, again, from the ground level who's supported the efforts that have benefited me and other Black founders.
Up next, we welcome back Nina Johnson, and we'll be joined by Chester Bell for a conversation about the programs, services, and initiatives that U.S. Bank is undertaking to help combat systemic racism and disadvantages as it pertains to mortgage lending and home ownership. Stick around.